think about your average Tuesday. Just a regular day. I want you to calculate how much of your daily energy, your absolute core cognitive bandwidth, is drained just by managing other people's emotions.
Oh, man. Probably way more than any of us want to admit.
Right, like you are soothing a stressed-out friend over text, or you are carefully tiptoeing around a coworker's inexplicably bad mood at the office. Or maybe you are constantly accommodating a partner's anxieties the very second you walk through the front door.
It is undeniably just exhausting.
It really is.
But what if you just stopped? Like, what if, starting tomorrow, you adopted a policy of total emotional detachment?
It forces a genuinely jarring thought experiment, doesn't it? Because we are so deeply conditioned to believe that empathy is, well, the ultimate human virtue.
Exactly.
We operate on this baseline assumption that anticipating and soothing the emotional needs of others is the fundamental glue of a functioning society. So stripping that away feels entirely counterintuitive to how we're wired. Yeah. Completely. And today, we are taking a deep dive into a text that not only strips that away, but actively weaponizes the absence of empathy.
It really does.
We are unpacking a 2021 essay by an author named Shu Feng. It was translated by Kinyu and edited by Peter. And the title alone is just a massive provocation. It's called, "Would It Be Good If People Could Treat Each Other a Way That Is More Uncaring?"
Quite the title.
Right. And this essay isn't just some casual opinion piece either. It is deeply rooted in a specific philosophical framework or community that the author references called Lifechanyuan.
Yeah, and the overarching mission of our deep dive today is to really dissect this highly unconventional, deeply provocative framework. The author essentially argues that our human obsession with caring and, emotional soothing is actually our greatest weakness.
A liability.
Exactly. He posits that the instinct to help is actively holding us back as individuals and ultimately degrading us as a species.
Okay, now before we go any further into the architecture of this argument,
Yeah.
I need to make something very, very clear to you listening.
Yes, absolutely.
This source material contains highly extreme, politically charged, and frankly very controversial views. We are going to be discussing references to authoritarianism, social Darwinism, and even hypothetical scenarios involving domestic violence.
It gets intense.
It does. And we are not endorsing or validating any of the viewpoints in this text. I want to be super clear about that. Our goal in this deep dive is simply to impartially report on the ideas contained in the original source material and analyze the author's underlying philosophy.
Right. We are treating this essay entirely as a philosophical artifact. The objective here is to just understand the mechanics of the argument, map out how the author arrives at these extreme conclusions, and examine the logical foundation of this Lifechanyuan worldview, regardless of the discomfort it might provoke.
Exactly. So let's start with where the author believes humanity basically took a wrong turn. He draws a very stark, deliberate line between the animal kingdom and human society.
Yeah, he positions animals as the undisputed gold standard for raising young.
Which is an interesting place to start.
It is. He specifically points to birds and mammals to illustrate this. His observation is that in nature, survival requires a strictly uncaring policy the very moment the offspring reaches physical capability.
So no transitional phase.
None at all. Once a baby bird is hatched, fed, and physically capable of foraging on its own, the parent bird doesn't ease them into independence. There is no, soft launch. The adult bird decisively implements this uncaring policy by literally expelling the children from the nest.
They just force them out into the wild to figure it out or perish.
Exactly. And he notes that the same brutal efficiency applies to mammals. As soon as the offspring can find food, the parental transaction is entirely over.
But humans, according to the author, suffer from this weird destructive compulsion to just coddle each other endlessly.
Yes. The author views our lifelong familial bonds and this multi-generational care we do not as advanced emotional intelligence, but as a literal biological defect.
A defect, wow.
Yeah. And he illustrates this perceived defect by citing a specific, very extreme anecdote. He brings up a report of a mother in her 70s who is in very poor health. She's dealing with multiple illnesses.
Oh, yeah.
Yet she remains the sole financial provider for her adult son.
Right. And we really need to emphasize the scale of this specific example here.
Yeah.
Because this isn't a young 20-something struggling to find his footing in a tough economy.
No, not at all.
This is a man in his 40s. And according to the text, he went to the United States, obtained a doctorate degree, came all the way back to China, and now absolutely refuses to look for work.
Just refuses.
Yeah, he spends every single day holed up in his room playing video games while his sick, elderly mother covers all of his living expenses.
It's wild. And for the author, this scenario serves as the ultimate indictment of human empathy. In his framework, the mother's endless care hasn't produced a functioning, contributing adult. It has produced a highly educated parasite.
That's a harsh way to put it, but yeah.
Well, the empathy is literally draining the life out of the elderly mother while simultaneously locking the son into a state of complete developmental stagnation.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I have to push back on his core biological premise here. The author seems to view human empathy as, like, a software glitch that diverts us from the efficiency of the animal kingdom.
Right.
But if we look at basic evolutionary biology, human brains are essentially born undercooked compared to, say, a foal that can walk 10 minutes after birth.
That's true.
Isn't the fact that we care for our young, long past physical maturity exactly what allows us to develop complex, high-level skills? Like getting a PhD in the first place. You certainly do not get a doctorate by being kicked out of the nest the second you can chew solid food.
No, you don't.
Our neuroplasticity requires that extended period of safety to develop complex social and survival strategies.
But what's fascinating here is that that is the glaring scientific counterweight to his bird in the nest analogy. But the author is choosing to bypass evolutionary neuroscience entirely.
Interesting.
To focus on immediate resource allocation, he uses the anecdote of the 40-year-old PhD to reframe emotional caretaking, not as a virtue, but as a crippling societal liability.
Okay, so how does he justify that leap?
His thesis rests on the idea that humans are inherently imperfect, meaning emotional outbursts and failures are inevitable. The price we pay in time, energy, and physical resources just to manage those imperfections is what he calls huge. He sees empathy as a black hole for human potential.
Wow. Okay, so if we accept his premise that adult empathy is a massive resource drain, it forces us to ask, like, where does he think this glitch actually starts?
Oh, he thinks it starts the moment we are born.
Yeah, he points to the universal experience of childhood, specifically a toddler getting upset, rolling around on the ground, and throwing a tantrum.
And he specifically targets parents and grandparents in this scenario. He notes that grandparents often love their grandchildren even more fiercely, which results in this intense drive to coax the child, pacify them, and restore their happiness by any means necessary.
Right. And this is where we see the radical micro-level application of his Lifechanyuan philosophy. Because if caring is a liability, how do you raise a child?
Well, the author advocates for the exact opposite of modern developmental psychology.
Yeah, he says do not pacify the child rolling on the floor, do not coax them. His explicit, uncompromising solution is to deliver 2 slaps on his bottom.
Just instant physical correction.
Right, to instantly stop the behavior.
He argues this immediate, physically uncaring correction will permanently halt the behavior. He states with total confidence that the child will never roll around and cry again after experiencing that consequence.
Which is quite a claim.
It reveals a purely mechanistic, hyper-behavioral view of human psychology. It is cause and effect, entirely devoid of empathy or any attempt to understand the root cause of the child's distress.
And that uncaring policy doesn't soften as the child grows either. Like, at age 18, the author mandates a hard, non-negotiable cutoff. The parents are entirely done.
Entirely done.
If the teenager wants to go to college, they figure out the tuition themselves. If they want to buy a house, it is on them. When it comes to funding their own marriage, it is completely up to their own abilities. The parents must literally wash their hands of all financial and emotional burden.
And the intended mechanism behind this harsh cutoff is the forced forging of resilience. By refusing to worry about or subsidize these massive life milestones, the child is thrust into a sink or swim environment.
Kicked out of the nest.
Exactly. The author believes this artificially recreates that bird getting kicked out, forcing the young adult to develop a remarkably strong ability to survive independently within modern society.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting and honestly pretty disturbing. He takes this exact same framework of total emotional detachment and applies it directly to marriage.
He does.
The text claims that from the beginning of a romantic relationship, straight through marriage and into old age, couples spend an enormous amount of energy merely managing each other's moods.
Yeah, he identifies marital emotion as a staggering inefficiency. And to illustrate his solution, he proposes a highly extreme, disturbing hypothetical scenario.
Yes, he does.
He asks the reader to imagine a wife who is deeply upset. He writes that she cries, makes trouble, and threatens to hang herself.
Which is a severe crisis.
Right. Conventional psychological wisdom, or just basic human compassion, dictates that this is an acute crisis requiring immediate de-escalation, professional intervention, and, deep empathy.
Of course.
The author's directive is the exact opposite. He states the husband should absolutely not give in or consider her emotions. Instead, the text explicitly dictates the husband should scold, beat, and threaten to kill her.
I'm genuinely struggling to see how he squares this logic. He's suggesting fighting emotional distress with literal threats of lethal violence. But practically speaking, emotional regulation and compromise aren't just giving in. Aren't they the actual glue that keeps a family or partnership from self-destructing?
You'd think so.
I mean, I have to assume his definition of harmony is just, like, silence. Is he equating a completely suppressed, terrified partner with a peaceful home? Because if two people meet every emotional crisis with hostility and violence, the partnership doesn't thrive. It fractures instantly.
This raises an important question, right? You've hit on the exact mechanism of his philosophy. We really need to unpack how he fundamentally defines the word harmony.
Because it's clearly not how we define it.
No, because he concludes that horrifying hypothetical by claiming this absolute refusal to accommodate emotions will make the relationship more harmonious, beautiful, and healthier.
But how does he define harmony if it involves physical and verbal abuse?
For the author, harmony has nothing to do with mutual understanding, emotional intimacy, or shared vulnerability. He defines harmony purely as the total eradication of emotional friction.
The total eradication.
Right.
Yes. It's like he views human emotion as a leaky pipe in a factory. Instead of doing the hard work of fixing the plumbing, the communication, the empathy, the compromise, his solution is to just permanently shut off the water main entirely so the factory floor stays dry.
Wow. What a dark analogy, but it makes sense.
If you never reward a tantrum or a crisis with attention, he believes the outbursts will cease because they serve no functional purpose. By responding with overwhelming dominance, he believes you crush the inefficiency. It is a hyper-utilitarian worldview where human connection is reduced to operational smoothness.
Okay, so if we scale this up, how does a neighborhood of suppressed, isolated, hyper-efficient homes function as a nation? Like, if we zoom out from the family unit and the marriage, what happens to society at large?
Right, the macro level.
Yeah. The author provides a very specific macro-level blueprint, and it relies heavily on unfiltered social Darwinism.
The transition from the micro to the macro is seamless for him. He explicitly writes, "Let the strong live beautifully and let the weak linger out a feeble existence."
Just brutal.
And he frames this not as cruelty, but as strict adherence to the laws of nature.
Which dictates his entire view on social safety nets. He has zero interest in charity or systemic relief. His rule is brutally simple. If you have the physical ability to work, no one should take care of you.
Yeah.
The text literally asks, if you have the ability to work, why should others take care of you?
He allows a very narrow exception, though, only for those entirely physically incapable of laboring, such as the elderly or severely disabled individuals.
Right.
He concedes the strong should take care of them, but if you have two working hands and you happen to be struggling mentally, economically, or situationally, you are completely on your own.
He even scales this up to global geopolitics, which is wild. He advises that in international relations, countries should only follow and unite with strong nations, as for the weak and poor countries struggling on the global stage. His direct advice is that it is best to just let them die, let them vanish from the map.
Which leads directly into the governmental system he proposes to run this ruthlessly efficient world. He calls it Schuifeng-style communism. And it is a fascinating, highly contradictory political architecture.
Contradictory is the right word for it.
He explicitly denies any democratic mechanisms, instead emphasizing what he calls Superman philosophy and outright dictatorship.
Okay, so what does this all mean? I really need to map out the logic here.
Yeah.
Because it feels like a massive paradox for you listening to consider.
It really does.
It sounds like a ruthless corporate restructuring applied to the entire human race. But if the leader of this dictatorial system has to be, in his own words, completely selfless, how does that possibly square with a philosophy that literally champions the strong living beautifully while the weak perish?
Right.
It feels fundamentally contradictory. If your core mandate is letting weak nations die and refusing to help the struggling citizen, Where exactly does the selflessness come in?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that paradox is the crux of Shufeng-style communism. The author is attempting to forcefully weld together two historically opposing ideologies.
Okay.
On one hand, you have extreme individualism, the social Darwinist survival of the fittest where the weak fail. On the other hand, you have extreme collectivism, a strictly ordered communist society where everyone must labor for the whole.
So how does a leader fit into that?
The selflessness he demands from the dictator isn't about compassion. It's about an unwavering, robotic dedication to maintaining the efficiency of the system over their own personal enrichment.
Ah, I see. And the text is incredibly rigid about participation in the system. Everyone must participate in labor, and the punishment for failing to do so is immediate expulsion. He repeats it like a mantra. Whoever does not work, throw them out. Whoever's lazy, throw them out.
And it goes beyond just physical labor, too. Emotional labor and social friction are heavily policed under this system. He writes, whoever is always in a bad mood and disgruntled, throw them out.
And whoever bullies people, throw them out. It all boils down to a stark transactional existence. Everyone must have tangible value and create tangible value.
Exactly.
If you have no value, or if you create emotional friction that slows down the machine, you are literally ejected from society.
The author has basically constructed a purely utilitarian utopia. Human value is determined exclusively by output. Emotional needs aren't just viewed as annoying, they are treated as punishable offenses against collective efficiency.
It's so bleak.
In this framework, the ideal citizen isn't a thinker, a philosopher, or collaborator. He explicitly states he hates people who talk a lot and do nothing, and he actively dislikes people who try to offer advice.
Right. He reserves his praise solely for the person who simply says, I will take care of it.
Yeah.
Just the unquestioning, uncomplaining execution of tasks.
Yep.
Which brings us back to that core Lifechanyuan value he champions. The text states clearly, do not offer help if someone does not ask for it.
That single sentence perfectly encapsulates the whole community ethos. It creates a society of completely isolated nodes of productivity. You do your job, I do mine.
Right.
If you stumble, I do not catch you unless you explicitly request assistance. And even then, I only help if you are deemed worthy of survival based on your baseline ability to work.
But historically speaking, utopian visions that attempt to surgically remove human emotion always collapse into totalitarian dystopias.
Right.
You can't program human beings like nodes in a server farm.
Precisely, because you are replacing organic social trust with enforced dictatorial compliance. It is an architecture of total cold self-reliance maintained by the constant threat of being thrown out into the void.
Well, we have covered a tremendous amount of philosophical ground today in this deep dive. We started with the observation of a mother enabling her 40-year-old son, using it as a springboard to critique modern emotional coddling.
We did.
Then we moved through a, frankly, shocking vision of family and marital life, violently stripped of all empathy. And we scaled all the way up to an authoritarian blueprint for a society utterly devoid of unearned care.
It is an incredibly stark, unforgiving landscape to survey. The author methodically strips away almost everything we traditionally associate with humanity: our compassion, our patience, our unconditional support for the vulnerable, and replaces it with raw, unfeeling efficiency.
And while the methods presented in this text are extreme, deeply controversial, and highly disturbing in their application, the underlying premise does force an uncomfortable audit of our own lives.
It does.
It asks you to evaluate where your emotional energy actually goes every single day. It prompts a very tough personal question for you to consider. Are there areas in your life right now where your instinct to help or soothe is actually just enabling someone else's stagnation?
That's a great point.
Are you in some metaphorical way financially supporting a 40-year-old who just wants to play video games because you are too afraid to implement an uncaring policy?
It is a highly valid reflection to take away from such an extreme text. Sometimes our deep desire to avoid conflict or discomfort in the short term does create massive debilitating dependencies in the long term.
But I want to leave you with the author's own surprising conclusion, because after laying out this entire brutal, meticulously structured, uncaring philosophy, Shufeng admits he doesn't actually know if he's right.
Yeah. He literally concludes the essay by writing, "Is this correct? I do not know. Only practice and time can prove it and give the answer."
It is a wild, almost jarring admission after delivering such a rigid authoritarian manifesto. So I want to leave you with this final thought to mull over today. Think back to that average Tuesday we talked about at the very beginning.
Mm.
That feeling of your bandwidth being totally drained by managing everyone else's emotions. If a society actually successfully stripped away all unasked for help, if we completely eliminated emotional accommodation like the author suggests, would it actually forge the highly resilient, self-sufficient supermen he envisions? Or would that utter cold isolation destroy the very trust, the very social fabric, and the baseline collaboration required to build a functioning society in the first place? Keep that in mind the next time you find yourself managing someone else's mood.